Let's talk to God. One more thing, like, subscribe, and share. Come on, let's talk to God. Woo!
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Cutler here on the Let's Talk to Cutler broadcast. Excuse me. Sounds like I got a frog in my throat, but I don't. It is July 19th. It's a Tuesday, and I got to stop. Let's say it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday. I'm just joking. I know it's Tuesday, but a happy Tuesday to everybody. And I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad for these 1,800 seconds that we spend together, because this channel is about inspiration. It's about motivation. It's about making sure that we take the time to sometimes challenge ourselves to show up a little bit better tomorrow than we did today. I promise you, it does not mean at all. Many of you have heard me say this, and I continue to say it every time, because there's something about affirmation. Affirmation is something that you continuously remind yourself, something that you continuously tell yourself that it's going to be all right, it's going to be okay. And one of our affirmations is, today was not a flop, it was not a failure, but it means that we just take the time to see how can I catapult myself into a position tomorrow where I'm better tomorrow than I was today. Because when I look at yesterday, I want to make sure that how I showed up today is a little better than how I showed up yesterday. It does not mean that I took a giant step. It does not mean that I just somersaulted into this position of better. It simply means that there has to be some growth. There has to be something that I did a little bit better today than I did yesterday. That's what life is all about. And so if you're passing by this channel for the first time, it is always my hope, it is always my desire to try to, before we leave, offer some inspiration, offer some motivation, offer an opportunity whereby we challenge ourselves. We don't necessarily need external challenging, but it's good. But one of the things that we always want to do is challenge ourselves to be all that we can be, challenge ourselves to be a little bit better, challenge ourselves to see our success, challenge ourselves to see our victory. So from time to time, we have to check in with ourselves and make sure that I'm okay, make sure that I'm all right, make sure that nothing is throwing me off my game today. So we're going to do that. We're going to do this evening what I call, have you checked your courage level? And we'll talk about what that means. But before we talk about what that means, I want to invite you, if this is your first time, please go ahead and subscribe. Go ahead and hit the notification bell so you'll know when I go live, when I upload new content, that sort of thing. And as you're coming in, knowing that we're going to get some inspiration, knowing that we're going to get some motivation, knowing that we might even be challenged, do me a favor, please. Go ahead and hit a thumbs up on the conversation, because it says to YouTube, I like what that guy's talking about. It says to me, Cutler, I'm encouraged by the stuff that you're sharing. I'm encouraged by these 1,800 seconds. I want to shout out the LTTC VIPs. I do that every Tuesday and every Thursday. They're the people who just jump into the chat first. Sometimes they beat me into the chat, or at least they get on before I do that. They're logged in and they're waiting to see what we're going to talk about. So I want to do a shout out to the LTTC VIPs this evening. So I want to see the top 3 people who jumped into the chat room and who beat me into the chat room. Let's see. There's Annie Cutler. Annie Cutler says, get aboard, let's ride. And that's what we're doing. We're literally riding along the highway of life. And we're making sure, by now, I hope it is settled within us that when we spend this time together, it's a moment when we're riding along the highway of life with the Let's Talk to Cutler family. And we're saying, as I go along this highway, what lessons can I learn? How can I be empowered to get a stronger grip on myself and a stronger grip on my brother and my sister's hand? That's what Let's Ride is all about. That's what getting aboard is all about. So thank you, Annie Cutler, for that. Then coming right in next is T Cutler, who says, good evening and happy Tuesday. Let's Talk to Cutler family. Well, good evening to you as well. Sometimes when the day has beaten you up, and when the day has drained you, when the day sometimes seems to have sucked the energy out of you, just hearing somebody say good evening and happy Tuesday just lifts your day. It certainly lifts mine. So thank you so much for that, T Cutler. And then coming right in the third, Paula D, who says, hello, everyone, not leaving anybody out. How about that? How about the power of that message alone to say, hello, everyone, which means that sometimes you have to speak to everybody and say to everybody in my circle, we're moving, we're advancing, we're going forward. Nobody is getting lost or left out under my watch, not under my watch. So sometimes we have to speak to everything that concerns us. So you all know I'm just seeing stuff and just going with it this evening, but absolutely. So hello to you as well. But this evening, I want to talk about checking our courage level. Earlier today, I had an opportunity to speak at an event that was hosted by the National Bar Association. And as I spoke with the cohort, as I spoke with the audience, it occurred to me, it was a group of young people, and it occurred to me that young people have some of the same concerns, they have some of the same trepidations, they have some of the same anxieties as older people. And they were asking questions that were related to confidence. They were asking questions that were related to discernment. They were asking questions that were related to judgment. They were asking questions like this: what happens when you think you're doing well and you feel like you're doing well, and then you run into a hiccup? What happens when all of a sudden you're up here and you get knocked back down to here? They were asking those kinds of questions, and I wanted to invite them to this platform. I wanted to invite them, but those young people, they're actually in an aggressive, assertive learning camp. So I didn't want to disrupt the learning ritual and the learning routine this week. But I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation that I had with them, and I decided that I would just share a part of it with us because it was all about courage. Sometimes we are mistaken as to what courage is. So I wanted to talk about that because one of the things that we don't always see in ourselves is courage. And perhaps that's because we don't always understand what courage is. Courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. So when we talk about checking our courage level, let's make sure we understand courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to face your difficulties while managing your fear. That's what courage is all about. It doesn't mean I have no fears at all, but courage simply means that I have the ability to face all of my difficulties while managing my fear. It's what I call fear management. It's not necessarily a good thing. I don't necessarily feel good about it, but I somehow have the wherewithal to manage it. We have these phrases, and it means that we don't always like the loads that we're carrying. Hello, my friend Wendy. It means that we don't always like the loads that we're carrying. Linda, Hattie, good evening to you as well. But courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. It's learning to manage the fear. Think about this, you all. I said to the group of young people earlier today, you can live with whatever you're managing. You can live with whatever you're managing. And even if you're managing something that does not necessarily feel good, you can still thrive and survive in spite of it. Cutler, why would you say that? I say it because I think about athletes who are in any given sport. They so often had to deal with something that's called pain management. Pain never feels good. But interview a number of athletes and they would tell you, yes, I was in pain. Yes, I was hurting, but guess what? I managed the pain and we still won the game. Just because you're managing something that does not feel good, that doesn't make you a loser. Sometimes we beat ourselves up because we find ourselves carrying these loads and we think, I shouldn't have to carry this load. I shouldn't have to deal with this. But here I am finding myself dealing with it again and again and again. Think about those athletes who are constantly dealing with pain management, but they deal with it again and again and again, and they don't let it stop them from winning. I think about people who deal with chaotic situations, and they're always dealing with some kind of cataclysmic and situations in life. That is what we call crisis management. Nobody likes the idea of having to manage crisis. Nobody likes the idea of having to manage chaotic situations that have gotten them in a downward spiral. But guess what? They manage it and they survive. It is the same thing with fear. You can manage it and survive. Think about people who have been disrespected, people who have been humiliated, people who have been discriminated against, who have been marginalized. They deal with anger. And so for them, life is about anger management. Anger does not feel good. Crises do not feel good. Pain does not feel good. Fear does not feel good. But just because we manage those things, it does not mean that we cannot be winners. I'll stand in the winner's circle with all of my flaws. I'll stand in the winner's circle with every single thing that I have to carry. I still stand in the winner's circle, even if I have to manage my fear. Managing fear means that I'm still taking responsibility for my life. I'm still taking responsibility for my future. And one of the things that I don't know where I came across it, but somewhere either I read or heard the other day that there are some things that you can do something about. Your beginning is not one of them. But courage says, I'll take responsibility for my future. I'll take responsibility for the outcome. I'll take responsibility for how it's going to happen. I can't do anything about the beginning. But one of the things that I can impact, one of the things that I can influence is how it's going to end. And so what do? I walk and I stand in a place of courage. I'm managing the fear. I have anxiety about how it's going to turn out. I'm sometimes ambivalent as to whether or not it's going to work out in my own best interest. If I may be honest, sometimes I have anxiety. Sometimes I have ambivalence. Sometimes I'm just a nervous wreck. But guess what? I manage the fear and I stand in the place of courage. And I say, I'm going to still take responsibility for how it ends. And of course, then my faith kicks in and my faith says, that's all right, because somehow we know that all things work together. All right? That's how we manage fear. I can live, if I'm managing it, I can live with it. Think about something as simple, and I shouldn't say simple because I don't want to diminish anybody's experience, but think about your household, your spouses, your children, if you have them. And you find yourself managing the household, and sometimes the household is not quite as peaceful and calm and serene as you want it. Sometimes it's topsy-turvy and chaotic and noisy and all of that kind of stuff. But guess what? We're managing. It does not mean that you throw in the towel on managing your household. You keep on managing it and you live. So that's what courage is. Hang on to the fact that courage is not the absence of fear. You may always deal with fear, but learn how to manage it. When I was younger, I don't think we necessarily talked about fear, and we didn't necessarily talk about courage. And sometimes because I didn't hear it talked about in my life, no one necessarily said to me that, oh, you're courageous. We didn't quite have that conversation. And sometimes because I didn't necessarily hear conversations about courage, I might have thought that maybe I shouldn't talk about courage because no one ever talked about me having courage. No one necessarily called me courageous. No one necessarily asked me about my fears. So I thought at one point, maybe I don't have courage because no one has ever said to me, you have it. Maybe I shouldn't talk about my fears. But as I got older, may I share this with you. My mother's always saying, thank you so much for giving me my flowers while I live, because there's so many wonderful things that she did and said, and she doesn't always remember. But I remember. Because here I was thinking that perhaps because no one has said to me that you have courage, I didn't think that I had courage. I could have gone my whole life thinking that. But it only took one conversation with my mother who reminded me that the exact opposite was true. You may not remember this, but one of the things you said, I didn't talk about you having courage. I didn't necessarily talk about you having confidence. I didn't necessarily talk about you having potential. And I said, well, why? You said, because I didn't want you. I didn't want you to get in your own way. It was always there. And I thought you saw it in yourself. You said it was always there. I didn't talk about it because it was so obvious. It was so apparent. It was always there. Isn't it ironic how we can sometimes walk around with something that everybody else sees and we don't see it ourselves? That is why we're having this conversation about how is your courage level. So for a few moments, Wendy, yes, it was your identity. Absolutely. I said to the young people today, I want you to be able to stand and sit in and live in something that you don't necessarily see about yourself that others look at you and see, and it is readily apparent. And some of them are just meeting me and say, what is it? How do you see courage in me so quickly? And I said to them, you're sitting in the summer camp, which was for them, it was a very competitive thing. And I said, despite the competition, you still filled out the application. I hope that helps somebody. I hope that speaks to you. Courage says, I don't know what the other end of the application is going to look like, but I'm managing my fear, and I'm not going to let fear stop me from filling out the application. I'm filling it out because I still somehow believe that all things are working together for my good. Courage says, I don't have all of my something that we call ducks in a row, but I do have the wherewithal to say I'm taking responsibility for some portion of my future. That's courage. Courage is standing up when you don't have it all together. That's my working definition of courage. Courage says I'm going to stand up even when I don't have it all together. Because if I sit down and do nothing, what am I going to do? If I sit here, I'm just going to die and wither away. But at least I can stand up and do something. Courage causes you to stand up and see yourself as great when everybody else sees you as nothing. I'm just sharing with y'all some of what I shared with the young people today when I spoke to them at the National Bar Association. Courage is the ability, I said, to stand in your greatness and see yourself great when everybody else sees you as nothing. Cutler, how do you see yourself great? One of the things you do is stop comparing yourself with other people. We've talked about this. Why? Because people create images and they create personas. People live behind facades. They present the most glamorous life. And I used to see these wonderful profile pictures, and I just wanted one. I just wanted one good profile picture. Can I tell you all what I did? Because I saw these people who had these fantastic profile pictures, and I was comparing mine with theirs. So I took out my camera, and before I knew it, I took 35 pictures. 35, just to select one to post, because I saw everybody else with these perfect pictures, and you all, it took me 35 pictures just to get one that I like. If you have an iPhone, you know what I'm talking about when I say this. I was taking pictures in live mode, pictures in portrait mode, pictures in studio light, pictures in stage light, until I realized everyone does not have a perfect life. 35, J-Song, for you, 35. And I realized everybody does not have a perfect life. Everybody does not have a perfect house. Everybody does not have a perfect smile. Everybody does not have a perfect car. Everybody does not have a perfect career. Everybody does not have a perfect, you fill in the blank. So stop. If you want to learn how to stand in your greatness, stop comparing yourself to other people. Why would you say that, Cutler? Because one reason is that you don't know the people, you don't know their stories. So stop comparing yourself with people whose stories you don't know, whose shoes you've never stood in, whose struggles you have not had to experience. Stop doing that. And stop feeling, as I told you all, this is just a check-in. Check-ins are those things that we've already talked about before, but I feel the need to just bring them up again. So here we are checking in on our courage level. Stop feeling as though you have to race anybody. Understand that you are in a race with one person and one person only, and that is you. You are in a race with you yourself. Race one person. Why would I say that? Because when you race that one person, you'll always win. No one can beat you at being you. I'm going to keep on going. But when I talked about these things, and I talked about comparing yourselves and all this, Jay Song says, I paid for my smile, but these feet are another story. But people sometimes put up these facades. So don't get in a race with them. Don't get in a race with them. Thank you, Linda. Linda Martin says, I had a high school teacher who tells me there's always going to be someone better than you and someone worse than you. Absolutely. So when you start comparing, and unfortunately, Linda, thank you so much for that, because unfortunately, what are we doing in social media, especially our young people nowadays? They're finding people who in their mind's eyes are always better. And so now I'm always comparing myself with somebody who I think is better. I'm not even considering the fact that somebody who's worse than I am. And many times the people we're looking at and we're thinking that they are better, we don't know their story. We don't know their experience. And sometimes they would say, if I could just change a day with you. What I've discovered is that there are enough of them. What we need is the one you. You in all of your uniqueness, you in all of your experiences, you in all of your splendor, you in all of your excellence, in all of your courage. Even if you are an identical twin or a triplet, we need the uniqueness that only you can bring. Courage says, I need to stand in my individuality. Doesn't mean that I don't have a village. It doesn't mean that I don't have a community. It does not mean that I don't have a support system, but I learn how to stand in my individuality. Stop comparing myself with everybody else. Then courage says, let me make sure. The second thing courage says, how to stand in your greatness is to know who you are. You can imagine that saying that to teenagers who are 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old today, they would say, well, they refer to me as Professor Cutler. Professor Cutler, what does that mean? Know who you are. And I said, well, who are you? And they told me their names. And they would say things like, I am the son of, I'm the brother of, or I'm the sister of, I'm the grandson of. And I said to them, but we just talked about standing in your individuality. Sometimes, in order to know who you are, you've got to spend some time with yourself and do some self-reflection. Learn to look at yourself not as someone's sister or someone's brother or someone's husband or someone's wife or someone's son or someone's daughter or someone's friend or someone's student or someone's church member or someone's employee. Learn how to take the someone's off and do self-reflection. Cutler, how do we do that? I'm so glad you asked me. You look at the questions. You look at the questions that don't require anyone else to answer. You've got to look at the questions, because so many times, and you're right, Jason, for you, so many times standing in your individuality takes years because we're so connected to other people. But I offered them this and I offer it to us this evening. What kind of questions, Cutler, would you suggest we ask ourselves? Questions that do not require you looking at someone else to say, what is the answer? Questions like, what do you like to do? They asked me today, Professor Cutler, how is it that in the midst of your career and doing what you wanted to do, you went to law school, you ended up teaching over 15 years, around 15 years on Howard, you end up writing books, you're doing these things. How did you decide? Were there people who tried to box you and paint you in a corner? I said yes, and one of the things that I learned to do was not to let people put me in a box, because if they put you in a box, trust me, at some point, they're going to want to nail the lid shut. And I resolved that I will never live in a box, because one day when I die, I'll be in a box for the rest, as long as that body's going to last in the box. So don't try to put me in a box. So here's the question. Ask yourself, what do you like to do? What are you good at doing? What do you hope to become? Why do you want to become that? Questions like, what makes you laugh? What makes you cry? If you could stand on the top of the mountain and scream, what would you say? Those are the kinds of questions that you ask yourself, because those questions are not dependent upon anybody else. Your response is not contingent upon what anybody else has to say. You get those answers without looking at anybody else. So I want us all to be okay with knowing yourself. Be okay with seeing yourself. Learn to see the greatness in you that you so often see in other people. Learn to visualize. Learn to visualize. Because here's what I believe. If you can't visualize, you will never realize. Can I say that again? Learn how to visualize, because if you can't visualize, then you'll never realize. And if you can't realize, you will never actualize. What does it all mean, Cutler? It means if you can't project your present onto your future, you'll never work to accomplish what you see yourself as in the future. If you can't realize it, if you can't visualize it now, you will never work to realize it, making it a reality. That's all realizing is. And if you can't realize, you will never actualize. Actualize means being able to stand in the fullness of who you are. But it starts with visualizing first. Learn how to take a glance in your proverbial mirror and be okay with seeing your potential and with seeing your greatness. Hold up the proverbial mirror and say, I'm okay with what I see. And make sure, do me a favor, make sure if you're going to do this demonstration tomorrow, the next day, make sure that when you look in the proverbial mirror, you look like this and you don't look like this. Because when you look through the mirror like this, it has cracks in it. And you'll see things through the cracks, things that really don't reflect who you are. And you'll start trying to become what you see through the cracks. But look at your mirror whereby you only see the wholeness and the fullness of who you are. You're not looking at the cracks. You're not seeing anybody else's life, because when you start seeing everybody else's life through the cracks, then you'll try to reflect that. And you'll try to visualize that, but that's not who you are. Learn to look in your own mirror, in the fullness of your mirror, and see who you are. See what you possess. See what you bring to the table. See your excellence. See your successes. Got to do that. You got to know who you are. And then the third thing that I would offer us this evening, I would offer us something simple. It is sometimes overstated because we hear this so much and we don't really put it into practice. And it simply says, believe in yourself. Cutler, why in the world would you save this as the last step? Why would you suggest this after you suggested spending time seeing yourself and then not comparing yourself with other people? Why would you save this one for last? Why would you talk about it after seeing yourself? Why would I do that? Because seeing is believing. And once you are okay with seeing yourself, you learn that the mirror doesn't lie. I have to speak this to myself so often. When I'm okay with seeing my future, when I'm okay with visualizing, when I'm okay with all of those things, when I'm okay with what I see, then I believe what I see. Seeing is believing. And once you're okay with seeing yourself, you learn to say the mirror doesn't lie. You learn how to hold up the mirror. And the first time you hold up your proverbial mirror, you might laugh because you may say, this feels awkward, Cutler. It doesn't feel quite like something I'm supposed to do. But from time to time, you hold up that proverbial mirror and you look at yourself. And at some point, the reality of who you are is going to take root in your soul. And who and what you find looking back will be the greatness that other people so often see in you that you don't see in yourself. I believe, is sometimes an insult to the Creator not to see the greatness that is in your life. It's more than a cliche. It's more than a hackneyed expression. It's more than a hyperbole. When you look at yourself and say, I see greatness in me, it's more than all those things. It's a reality. Get comfortable with it. I'm okay with what I see. With who and what I find looking back, I'm okay. And so be okay with it. Be okay with your greatness. And when you see greatness looking back, all I want you to say is, I see greatness and I believe it. I wish I had the wherewithal for all of us to come to open to chats and all of that, but I can't do that. But wherever you are this evening, wherever you've allowed me to speak to you, whether it's your living room, your dining room, or wherever it is, the only thing I want you all to do for me this evening is to say to yourself, I see greatness and I believe it. Nobody else has to believe it except you. Because when you believe it, you teach people how to treat you. You treat me like I'm something great. Treat me like I'm somebody great. It is not egotistical. It is not self-aggrandizing. It is none of those things to see greatness in you. Those things happen with how you manage and how you navigate it and how you share it with other people. But to see greatness in you, in yourself, is not offensive. And do not let people, can I tell you, I've lived almost 60 years. I'm on my way to 60. I got a few years to get there. But do not let people who are intimidated by your greatness cause you to stack it and put it aside somewhere and never go to get it again. Never mind people who are intimidated by your greatness, and people will say off the cuff things. They will say off colored things. They will say things and they think it's so deep and wonderful, but it's crazy and curious. Don't let people who are intimidated by your greatness cause you to suppress it. So as we are leaving this evening, I want you all, if you got your keyboard and you can do it, then do me this favor. Right, thank you, Bobby Dunmore. Right, I see greatness in me and I believe it. Because what I believe is that it is an insult to the Creator to know that He's taken the time to invest in us, invest in our lives, invest in our futures, till the soil in our lives, plant the seeds in our lives, do the work in our lives, and we not see the greatness. One of my favorite colors from the movie Color Purple is the one where they're walking through the fields and they say, I believe it must piss God off how people can walk by the color purple and never notice it. I believe that it has to offend the Creator how you can walk by your own greatness and never acknowledge it. So what is my offering to us this evening? Yes, at the end of the conversation, here is my offering. My offering is the power. I offer us the power to see greatness in our lives. I see greatness in me and I believe it. And I'm the only one who has to believe it. Doesn't matter that nobody else believes it. So this, my friends, has been our evening. This has been our evening of having checked our courage levels. I want to thank you so much. Stand in your courage. Stand in your greatness. Never mind them. Stand in your uniqueness. Thank you all so much for these 1,800 seconds. Listen, I got to go. But do me a favor. Let's keep building community. Let's keep maintaining connectivity. Let's invite somebody to this conversation, because somebody, no doubt, somebody is struggling with other people intimidated by their greatness, and they need to hear this conversation. Tell them, y'all come on and let's talk to Cutler. Let's listen. Keep your heads up. Keep your hopes up. Stay safe. Stay sane. Know this. From my heart to yours, there is and always will be so much love. I see greatness in all of you, and I believe it. Good night. I'll see you Thursday.